Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev all weighed in ahead of their championship fight in London, and a few interesting things coming out of the weigh-in, and we'll cover that, as well as the tetchiness, a bit of finger wagging between the two, the fighters having to be separated. Also, I'll pose a question later in the video, but I'll ask it now. Does Anthony Joshua need a dominant performance? Certainly a question. Also, the other fights that are on the bill in terms of the heavyweight action, we'll cover the weigh-in off briefly at the back end of this video. And obviously a few final thoughts about this main event. But first, we'll start with the weigh-in. Anthony Joshua, 240 3/4 pounds on the scale. The second lightest weight since 2014 for him. The previous lightest since 2014 was his last fight against Andy Ruiz Jr., the rematch, where we saw him moving and boxing, utilizing his skills and boxing to a decision. So for me, this weight tells me that he is prepared to box in spots like he did against Ruiz Jr., that he is ready to go 12 rounds, box 12 rounds if he has to. Earlier in his career, when Joshua was 245 to 250, there were times in different fights where he did look like he was gassing and tiring, but he did reinvent his body to some extent for that Ruiz Jr. rematch, came in much leaner and was able to go the distance relatively easily. And obviously against a guy like Kubrat Pulev, who doesn't throw a whole ton of volume, if Joshua is boxing with him, he can probably expect to go to a decision and still have some gas in the tank. So I think he is prepared for every eventuality here. Obviously, a lot of people do believe that Anthony Joshua is going to go in there and knock Kubrat Pulev out, but I think what we might see first is some caginess. I think Joshua is going to take some rounds to just figure Kubrat Pulev out and try to break him down and ultimately try to stop him later in the fight. Joshua himself has said he expects a stoppage around 7 to 9. And to me, that would suggest a game plan where he is boxing early on and actually being a little bit circumspect and defensively responsible. Kubrat Pulev, meanwhile, he was also a lightweight for him. He was 239.5 pounds, which is actually his lowest weight since his third fight all the way back in 2009. So clearly Kubrat Pulev has left nothing to chance in his training. He's coming in light. He is probably thinking that he can go rounds with Joshua, try to box to a decision. This lighter weight tells me that he is going to be boxing, that he is going to be moving, and most likely he's going to be fighting from the outside. That was a feature of his last good performance, which was against Hughie Fury, which was in 2018. Also a very low weight for him at that stage, 240.5 pounds. And he did sort of just pick his spots. He was patient, and ultimately he was able to use the jab to good effect and box to a decision against Hughie Fury. Hughie Fury had a few sort of issues in that fight. He did have an injury, but Kubrat Pulev was able to handle him, comfortably enough on the scorecards at least. But he did take a couple of punches at times. It took Hughie Fury a number of rounds to actually land that slinging right hand. So Kubrat Pulev is going to have to be careful here, because he might be able to box with Joshua. He might be able to win some rounds here at range. I don't expect him to be boxing from the mid-range or up close for extended periods. I think he will be working from the outside, playing the percentages, using his jab, which has been much vaunted in the past. And I think he is going to try and box and outbox Joshua, try to finesse Joshua and try to win a decision. Whether that's a path to victory for Kubrat Pulev in this fight, it remains to be seen. He's okay on the defensive end, but he can be touched up. And if Anthony Joshua lands, say, some straight right hands, long right hands, that could change the course of the fight and ultimately end in a Pulev stoppage. But I would say, as I commented after the Bogdan Dinu and Rydell Booker fight in particular, I think Kubrat Pulev has been boxing within himself, and these tune-ups that he's had, Booker in particular, I think he has been holding back. And this is last chance saloon for Kubrat Pulev. He's leaving nothing to chance here. He's almost 10 pounds lighter than his last two tune-ups of Booker and Dino respectively. He's going to give it everything. So Joshua should expect whatever the best version of Kubrat Pulev that is left, because Pulev is past prime now. He's knocking on the door of 40. This is Joshua's fight to lose. but Kubrat Pulev probably believes that he can outbox Anthony Joshua. He's the slightly shorter man. He also has a slightly shorter reach. So whether he is going to be able to implement some of the things he wants to do and is likely going to try to do from range remains to be seen. But he is a decent technician, so that can't be forgotten. But I think there is going to be points in the fight where that's not going to be enough, and he probably will have to take a few chances, a few risks. Obviously, we know that Joshua is susceptible to the left hook. Can Kubrat Pulev land that? Is he going to try to work the body, slow Anthony Joshua down? The body punching was something that he was not willing to do against Rydell Booker, although I do think that he was holding something back in boxing within himself. But this is Joshua's fight to lose. He's predicted a round 7 to 9 stoppage, and actually you have to ask the question here. Does Anthony Joshua need a dominant performance in this fight? Bearing in mind, and this might take some people aback, he hasn't had a stoppage win in more than 2 years. The Alexander Povetkin fight, which was in September 2018, was the last time that Anthony Joshua got a stoppage. And that feels like a long time ago, but bearing in mind he's only had 3 fights since, this being the 3rd. 2 of them against Andy Ruiz Jr., one of them we know he famously lost, one of the biggest upsets in the heavyweight division in a long time. In the rematch with Ruiz, he boxed to a decision in a safety-first performance. So you do have to ask the question, and Joshua himself has said he wants a stoppage in the lead up to this fight. He's actually been a little bit all over the map because he had said, look, I need to walk through Kubrat Pulev, I need to get into the undisputed fight, I need to, create legacy and history and yada yada yada. There was a time where it looked like he was looking past Pulev, but he's been a bit more circumspect in the weeks leading up to the fight, a bit more respectful in his comments and Pulev's abilities, and that he's not going to underestimate him and overlook him. He's going to, I would say, probably box relatively conservatively early on. I think he will want to take a look at Kubrat Pulev and not rush into anything. But also, if Kubrat Pulev does decide, actually, I'm going to try do something like he tried to do against Vladimir Klitschko, which was be aggressive and try to rush in there, Joshua, I'm sure, will be more than willing to throw some lead left hooks and uppercuts and other shots, as Vladimir Klitschko was prepared to do, and ultimately that ended up being Pulev's downfall in that fight. His aggression worked against him. Kubrat Pulev got knocked out in 5 rounds. Joshua picking round 7 to 9. If he is to have a dominant performance, I think he needs to get him out of there earlier than that. And I think he's left a little leeway for himself to do that, being a bit more conservative on his pick. I'm leaning towards a potential Joshua stoppage earlier than round 7, but it wouldn't surprise me if this one does go later rounds. I think Kubrat Pulev will do what Kubrat Pulev normally does. He will be boxing within himself, playing the percentages, not really trying to do too much in terms of the risk factor. And if he can start to bank rounds, I think that will give Kubrat Pulev confidence. But this is Joshua's fight to lose. He's the younger, fresher guy with a power advantage. Arguably, he can probably box with Kubrat Pulev, and he does have the height and reach advantages. I am expecting Joshua to win by stoppage. How about you? But this question of the dominant performance, given he hasn't had a knockout in some time. He was in a safety-first performance against Andy Ruiz Jr. in the rematch and was knocked out by Ruiz Jr. 18 months ago. So there is obviously a question there, and some fans have been sort of saying he needs a very dominant and aggressive performance. He needs to take care of a guy who is past prime and not play with his food, as it were. I know some people won't, especially if you're a Pulev fan, won't like to hear people talking like that. But if Joshua is to continue building on his legacy and wants to be considered a dominant champion, he does have to take care of mandatories, especially older mandatories in fights that not necessarily the bulk of fans wanted to see. He's got to be dominant in those fights. This is an opportunity for him to be dominant, but obviously I don't think he's going to take any unnecessary risks. I think he will try to just work with what's in front of him. And if the opportunity comes for a counter-punch or land something significant and telling, he will take it, but he's not going to rush his work. And just before we wrap up this video, so we also have Hughie Fury versus Marius Vuk on the undercard. Hughie Fury coming in at a career heaviest 247 1/4 pounds. Marius Vuk, he was 274, and that's actually a comparable weight to Marius Vuk's last fight. That was back against Kevin Johnson in July. But Hughie Fury, he is almost 10 pounds heavier than his last fight, and as I mentioned, a career heaviest. So I do think we are going to see Hughie Fury looking to try to land some power shots on Marius Vuk. And let's face it, at this point and also through the course of his career, Marius Vuk has never been that hard to hit. So I think some of this weight is not just necessarily coming out of COVID. I think this is a deliberate decision by Hughie Fury to have a little bit more sort of meat on his punches and just overall heft and bulk for this fight. Styles make fights, and this is a good style matchup for Hughie Fury. So I do expect we will see him boxing and moving in spots, but I think he will hold his feet a little bit more because he's going to have the opportunity to do some things that he might not get away with better operators not named Marius Vuk. So Hughie Fury to win this one, but obviously there is the potential this goes the distance and maybe looks not great at times in terms of a television spectacle. I do hope I'm wrong on that, but it's an opportunity for us to see where Hughie Fury is at. Also, Martin Bakole and Sergey Kuzmin. Bakole coming in at 251.5 pounds. That's actually 12 pounds less than his previous fight. And I think for Bakole's sake, that is good because I think he's going to need to sort of push the pace a little bit here against Sergey Kuzmin, who'll be coming forward. He's a bit flat-footed, but he is a power puncher and he does have a good repertoire of punches. But I think Bakole will need to use those longer levers. He's got the height and the reach advantage here. And I think he needs to be throwing more punches, just outwork Sergey Kuzmin. I think this style for this fight is going to mesh well. We're going to see an all-action sort of fight. Maybe not right from the get-go, but I think there's going to be a lot of heavy leather landing, and I think most of it is going to be coming from Bakole's side of the fence. I do predict Martin Bakole to win this fight. I think Sergey Kuzmin has failed to impress in the past couple of years. This is a good stepping stone fight for Martin Bakole to get back to something approaching world level, and obviously prove that he's made some changes, then he's better than his loss to Michael Hunter in 2018. It's been a couple of years back. It feels like he's almost underrated now, but this is a chance for him to show the world where he's really at. So the Congolese fighter for me to win, most likely by a dominant sort of decision, but I can't discount the possibility that he does stop Sergey Kuzmin because Bakole has been knocking out all manner of tough and durable journeymen and gatekeepers in the past 18 months or so, including Marius Vuk. What do you make of this fight? What do you make of the Hughie vs Vuk fight? And also, just before I go, can't forget, so Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev, there was some tetchiness there. This is obviously good for the 6 o'clock news, all that sort of stuff, the evening news. A bit of push and shove, some finger wagging here from Anthony Joshua. I mean, really, there's not too much to it. I'm sure that Kubrat Pulev won't mind that at all. Try to get under Joshua's skin. Whether that's going to work or not remains to be seen. But Joshua to win this fight for me, how about you? Are you picking an upset in Kubrat Pulev? He does have the tools to box with Joshua, potentially outbox him, but is he going to be able to avoid the power punches that Joshua does have in his arsenal? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.